Hi, Dr. Taylor Burkhardt back again to talk about the Met stream tonight, Louisa Miller. So this is Verdi's 15th opera that he ever wrote, and it starts off the beginning of his middle period, which we think, so this was premiered in 1849, Rigoletto came 2 years later in 1851, and then Traviata 2 years after that in 1853. So something actually that all of these operas have in common is that they're bourgeois dramas, which just means that it has to do with familial conflict and that there is a huge class element at play causing conflict. So in Louisa Miller, for example, it is a conflict between the nobility and the middle class. Rigoletto, very similar, and then La Traviata is something a little bit different, but still very much about those class differences. These three operas actually also have something else interesting in common. They have kind of a similar set of characters. So we have the strong paternal figure played by the baritone who gets really beautiful music. I think the baritone always gets the best music in Verdi. Then we have a strong soprano heroine who wants to take charge of her own life and ultimately dies as a result of that because that was still, it's still the 1850s. So women were not allowed to take control of their own lives. And then we have the passionate tenor character who is usually deeply flawed and at best just makes things a little bit worse for everybody. Obviously in the case of Rigoletto, he's the true villain. In Louisa Miller, he's just a piece of work, I'll tell you that. Louisa Miller. So one of the big things I want to talk about today is the idea of solida forma, which is just the standard form for a bel canto. And Verdi plays with this a lot. Once I talk about it, you will see it everywhere. If you already know what I'm talking about, fast forward. But this is just the standard parts of a scene. So we have the recitative, and then the cavatina, which sets up the scene, and then the cavatina, which is just the slow part where a character is feeling all of their feelings. And then we have a tempo di mezzo, which is when an internal or an external force causes the character to change path, to change their course of action. And then the cabaletta, which is where that course of action takes place, or they sing about the new course of action that they're going to take, actually. So in this scene, this is Mr. Miller's Aria in Act 1. He's just referred to throughout the opera as Miller. Does he have a first name? Who knows? But it is with the villain of this opera, Wurm, who of course is played by the bass. So just to give a little bit of context, prior to this scene, we have Luisa, who's celebrating her birthday with her boyfriend, Carlo. And Wurm says, he starts off the scene by saying, "Ferma ed ascolta," stop and listen to me. And then he goes, "Yeah, you heard me." And he gets this really abrupt figure throughout the recit that happens. And to me, that's him just cutting Miller off and saying, "No, listen to what I am saying." So Wurm starts out saying, "I feel the burning of jealousy in my breast." And then he goes on to explain why. He says, "I love your daughter, Luisa. A year ago I asked you if I could marry her. You didn't say no." And of course all of this is punctuated with that figure, right, in its various keys. And Miller says, "Yeah, I told you that you could marry her if she loved you." Burn, right? And Wurm doesn't take kindly to this. He says, "Well, why can't you just force her to marry me? Do you have no control of your daughter?" And then Miller ends his recit by saying, "Che dici mai?" Saying, "What are you saying? What do you mean?" It's cavatina time, where he's just saying the choice of a husband is sacred. And this is a very much thought of the Enlightenment to get a little nerdier on you today. The play that this was based on was written during the Enlightenment era, where people believed that each person was in charge of their own lives, their own destinies, as opposed to the Dark Ages, where it was all up to supernatural forces or religion. We now have each person is in charge of their own destiny. And he's just singing, "Sacred is the choice of the husband, and she should be free to choose." Here's a little bit of what his melody sounds like. So a very simple, very beautiful melody. And he just sings very passionately about why he feels the way he does. Gets a beautiful cadenza at the end. And then we get the tempo di mezzo. Wurm is not happy to hear any of this. And I find his accompanimental figure throughout this, or the variations of it, to be really interesting. He's saying, so what he's saying, first of all, is he says, "You better watch yourself, old man. You're going to end up destroying yourself." And what I find really interesting about this orchestral accompaniment is we have this really innocuous sounding melody, but underneath in the low strings we have like Wurm is unhappy, and then there's a little bit of menacing to it, right? So combined we get a little bit of a nicey-meeny effect, where his words sound one way, but really like he's giving advice, but it's really a threat. And we get variants later. And what he says, he goes on to say, because Miller says, "What do you mean?" And he goes on to say that man, Carlo, Luisa's boyfriend, is not what he seems. Miller says, "What are you talking about? You know this?" And then Wurm says, "Yeah, listen to me. He is the son of Count Walter." Miller says, "Oh no, he's the son?" Right? If we step it up a half step, then it makes it more dramatic, right? And Wurm says, "Yep, bye." And Miller's like, "What?" And he's like, "No, I'm leaving. I told you what I told you." And leaves Miller alone with his own thoughts to have his cappelletta, of course. So the reason this news is distressing to Miller is, first of all, his daughter's boyfriend has been lying about who he is. And second, he knows that, oh no, he's a member of the nobility. This can mean no good for me and for my family, because Miller is a retired soldier. They're solidly middle class, and he knows that family is going to have want nothing to do with Luisa, and that they would never accept her. So he sings about how, in his cappelletta, how his suspicions were correct. He never had a good feeling about Carlo. And the punchline for me is, he says, "Heaven, you made me a gift of one daughter only. Please keep her unharmed." Which to me is major Rigoletto vibes, but that's just me. So very heroic sound. He's wanting to protect his daughter. And yeah, so we've had the recitative, the cavatina, tempo di mezzo, cabaletta. guess what? We're gonna have another one in Act 2, and this is Luisa's. It's for me what is her most famous aria. She's had an aria in Act 1 already. This is a scene between her and a Wurm. It's called the letter scene. And at this point, Miller's worst suspicions have come true and he's been arrested. Wurm comes and tells Luisa that her father is to be executed, but that she can save him if she writes this letter that Wurm dictates. And Luisa is, not entirely trusting of this man. He's not a good man. The interesting part to me, though, is during this recitative, we get 3 really distinct orchestral accompaniments. We have this tensiony theme, and that's whenever Wurm is dictating. So, for example, here he says, Wurm, io giammai Rodolfo, non è mai, which just means, Wurm, I never loved Rodolfo. And Luisa reacts, so we get, when he's saying it, he finishes a mai, and then we get, which is Luisa going, what? Right? And we see that a little bit throughout these reaction things from her. Then, my favorite though, it's this clarinet solo, and it's so poignant and so sad that you can almost just see the tear rolling down Luisa's cheek as she's having to write these things that she knows are not true. So beautiful. He goes on to tell her to write that ambition won out. I was really only looking out for advancing myself through the ranks. I'm so sorry, Wurm. I want to return to my first love and to evade Rodolfo. Let's run away together at midnight. And at this, Luisa says, what? And she loses it. And we get this music. And a high B. Oh, guess what's coming up? Because she has a lot of feelings she needs to let out. We have the cavatina. And she's saying, Lord, punish me if I've done something wrong, but please don't leave me to these barbarous men. So she's just thinking about how awful her fate is. She repeats it, of course. It's so gorgeous. She just then she finishes it out with a beautiful cadenza, and then Wurm starts our tempo di mezzo again. He says, I'm not going to try to keep you here. You're free to go. I leave you alone. And then she says, okay, but what about my dad? And he said, oh, you heard me, he'll die. And then we hear that really poignant theme. This time it's in more instruments and it's much louder. And then she says, yeah, I'll write it. But she has a lot of feelings about it. And then he goes on and gives her more instructions about this letter. He tells her that she needs to swear that she wrote this letter of her own free will. And she says, I swear it. Then he goes on and sings that same melody again, and he tells her, oh, you also need to show up to court and tell everybody that you don't love Rodolfo, you love me, and you're going to leave with me. You wrote this letter yourself. And she has another outburst at that. She says, no. And he says, oh, you hurt me. Because he knows that she's going to do it to save her father. And then she has to say thank you. Those are her thoughts about it. You can hear in the orchestra exactly what these characters are thinking. Verdi is so brilliant about showing the psychological states of his characters through the orchestra. It's one of the things that really he starts developing specifically. So, but what she says in this cabaletta is actually really important, because what this tempo di mezzo has made her do is she's so devastated at the thought of having to do this that she wants to die. And she says, let my father's hand at least close my eyes in death. So she wants to see her father again. She wants to make sure he's safe, and then she wants to die. And it's, sorry, I'm terrible at reading on an iPad, I'm not used to it. The other part of this music, though, that I find really compelling is when she's singing about her father closing her eyes in death. The music is so different. It's major, and it's much more peaceful at first. And we finish out this cabaletta very gloriously, although it's very upsetting. Yeah, so those are two of the really big arias from this opera. I didn't even get to the final duet between her and Rodolfo, where he exhibits a lot of that behavior I was talking about, where he's just incredibly passionate and not really listening to Luisa. I'm not going to give that spoiler alert away, but I will say that that act is called the Poison Act. So a little Romeo and Juliet moment there. Anyway, I hope that you really enjoy this middle period Verdi tonight. I hope that you can see maybe some of these forms that we've talked about today in this and in some other works. But most of all, I hope that you really enjoy watching it. Thanks so much for listening to me, and I will see you in a later lecture.